The sky over Elysium Prime burned red as another orbital defense station exploded. On the planet's surface, the tall, graceful Elysians looked up in terror. Their world, once known for its crystal spires and flowering gardens, now prepared for war. Ambassador Nari stood at the command center's viewing window, her silver skin reflecting the emergency lights. She had lived for 300 years and had never imagined her people's peaceful civilization would end this way. "The Krell have destroyed our last line of satellites," reported Sung, her young assistant. His voice trembled, but he tried to stay professional. "They'll begin landing troops within hours." Nari nodded grimly. The Krell Dominion had appeared at the edges of Elysian space 6 months ago. At first they claimed to want trade, then they wanted resources. Finally they simply wanted conquest. "What about our other colonies?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Gone," Sung whispered. "Elysium Prime is all that remains." Around them, other Elysians worked frantically at control panels. Their species had focused on art, medicine, and growing things for millennia. Now they desperately tried to remember how to fight. Nari turned to the communications array. "Keep on me." Broadcasting the distress signal, on all frequencies. An older Elysian named Jay shook his head. "We've been sending for days. No one is coming." "Someone will hear us," Nari insisted. The humans, scoffed another controller. "They barely have ships that can reach their own moon." The Galactic Council classified them as a developing species. Nari remembered the human delegation she'd met 3 cycles ago. They were shorter than Elysians, louder, more energetic. The Council had dismissed them as primitive and unpredictable, but Nari had seen something in their eyes, a fire, a determination unlike anything in the older species of the galaxy. The floor shook as something struck the planetary shield. Warning alarms blared through the command center. "Shield capacity at 60%, reported Jay. "The Krell main fleet has arrived." On the main screen, hundreds of black angular ships surrounded their world. The largest one, nearly the size of a small moon, moved into position above the capital city. Outside the windows, civilians ran through the streets, carrying what few possessions they could as they headed for the underground shelters. The Elysian Guard, in their ceremonial armor never intended for actual combat, directed the crowds with calm voices that belied their fear. Nari closed her eyes briefly. Their people numbered only a few million now. The Krell had already captured or killed billions across their former colonies. Those taken alive were forced to work in mines and factories, building more ships for the Dominion. "Ambassador," called Sung urgently, "look at the orbital scan." The screen showed a new wave of Krell landing craft breaking through the weakening shield. Hundreds of them, each carrying troops and battle machines. "How long until they reach the city?" Nari asked. Commander Tay, leader of what remained of the Elysian Guard, stepped forward. His normally immaculate uniform was stained and torn from 3 days without rest. 6 hours, maybe less," he said quietly. "Our ground defenses might slow them, but—" He didn't need to finish, everyone knew. Nari returned to the communication station and pressed her palm against it. Her voice steady despite everything, she broadcast one final message. "This is Ambassador Nari of Elysium Prime. Our civilization stands on the brink of extinction. The Krell Dominion has destroyed our colonies and now surrounds our homeworld. If anyone can hear this, we beg for assistance. We have children, knowledge, art worth preserving." She paused, then added something she'd never thought she'd say. "We offer alliance, resources, whatever you ask. Please, help us." As she finished, the lights flickered. Another impact rocked the building. "Shield capacity at 40%, Jay announced. Nari looked out at her beautiful, doomed world and whispered, "Someone hear us, please." On her console, the distress signal continued to pulse outward, growing fainter with distance, racing against time toward stars that might not be listening. Nari could still remember the day humans first arrived on Elysium Prime. 3 cycles ago, before the Krell threat, their small ship had landed awkwardly in the central plaza, belching smoke and sparks. The Elysians had watched in fascination as creatures with round ears and varying skin tones emerged, looking around with wide eyes full of wonder. "They breathe our air," scientist Hana had whispered beside Nari. "Their biochemistry must be remarkably Similar to ours, the human delegation had been led by a stocky woman named Jin, who spoke with her hands as much as her words. She explained that humans had detected the Elysian deep space probes and followed the signals home. Nari smiled at the memory. Jin had presented gifts, music recordings, plant seeds, and carefully crafted metalwork. The humans lacked the Elysians' biological sciences, but they had developed remarkable skill with metals and electronics. Their ship, primitive by galactic standards, had been built with ingenuity that impressed even the most skeptical Elysian engineers. For 3 weeks, the humans had stayed. They learned quickly, asking questions that sometimes shocked the Elysians with their directness. They were loud, emotional, and endlessly curious. They ate strange foods from their ship's stores and shared them freely. They played games of strategy that revealed minds that thought differently than any species Nari had encountered. They see patterns we miss, Tay had commented one evening after losing a game to Jin. And they adapt so quickly. When representatives from the Galactic Council arrived to evaluate the newcomers, things changed. The council members, ancient species who had traveled the stars for millennia, found humans troubling. They fight among themselves, the Vuzan delegate had complained during the closed session. Their history is filled with warfare. They alter their environment instead of adapting to it, added the Xeth representative, and their emotions override their logic. Nari had argued for the humans. They're young as a species, but they learn faster than any race I've met. And they have something rare, they help others without calculating benefit. But the council had ruled. Humans were to be classified as a developing species, restricted to their own solar system until they matured. The humans had left Elysium with promises to maintain contact, but the council ensured that communication was limited. Now, as Nari stood in the crumbling command center, those memories felt like they belonged to another lifetime. The center shook as another Krell bombardment struck the weakening shields. "Ambassador," called Sung urgently. "There's a transmission breaking through the Krell jamming field." Nari hurried over, heart racing. "Who?" "I don't know," Sung said, adjusting controls. "It's using an unusual frequency, not galactic standard, static." Filled the speakers, then cleared to reveal a voice. Human, female, confident. "Elysium Prime, this is Captain Day of the Earth Defense Fleet. Our sensors show you under heavy attack. Hold position. Human Expeditionary Force inbound. Repeat, hold position." Silence fell across the command center. The Elysians stared at each other in disbelief. "Earth Defense Fleet?" Tay whispered. "The humans have a fleet? This has to be a mistake," Jay said. "They couldn't possibly—" "Ambassador," called the sensor operator. "Multiple objects just appeared at the edge of our system. They're moving faster than anything I've ever tracked." The main screen flickered to life, showing dozens of sleek ships, unlike the boxy human vessel Nari remembered. They were arrayed in formation, streaking toward Elysium Prime. "How did they develop such technology so quickly?" Hana breathed. "The council said they were centuries away from true space travel." Nari leaned forward, hope rising in her chest for the first time in days. "Open a channel to Captain Day." When the connection stabilized, Nari spoke clearly. "This is Ambassador Nari of Elysium Prime. We are under siege by the Krell Dominion. Our shields will fail within hours." "We know," came the reply. "The Krell have been busy. They've hit 3 other systems before yours. We've been tracking them." Nari gripped the console. "You've been... How?" "The council restricted your development." There was a pause, then a short laugh. "Let's just say the council underestimated human ingenuity. We'll be within engagement range in 20 minutes. Your job is to keep that shield up until we arrive." As the transmission ended, the Elysians looked at each other in stunned silence. "Do you think they can actually help us?" Sung asked quietly. Nari watched the tactical display as the human ships accelerated toward the unsuspecting Krell fleet. "I think," she said slowly, "that the Krell are about to learn what the Council feared most about humans." "Which is?" Tay asked. Nari turned to face them, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Never corner something that fights hardest when it has nothing to lose." The city was burning. Smoke billowed from the outer districts of Elysium's capital, as Krell landing craft punched through the weakening shields like needles through cloth. Each breach created a momentary flicker of blue light in the sky before another section of the city erupted in flames. Commander Tay stood on the balcony of the central tower, watching his world fall. Around him, the remaining members of the Elysian Guard prepared their final defenses. Unlike the Krell, who wore heavy battle armor and carried energy weapons, the Elysians were equipped with little more than ceremonial shields and stun batons that had been hastily modified for combat. "They're advancing from 3 directions," reported Minho, Tai's second-in-command. The young guard's face was streaked with ash and sweat. "The Eastern District has already fallen. They're using local civilians as shields." Tay's jaw tightened. The Krell had a reputation for brutality, but seeing it firsthand made his stomach turn. "What about the evacuation tunnels?" "Still holding. We've got about half the remaining population into the inner sanctum." Minho hesitated. "The rest won't make it." Below them, the city that had stood for 10,000 years was being systematically destroyed. The Krell moved with mechanical precision, block by block, their 6-limbed soldiers crawling over buildings like insects. Where the Elysians fought back, the Krell simply leveled entire neighborhoods with orbital strikes. "Commander," called a voice from inside. "Ambassador Nari needs you immediately." Tay gave one last look at his dying city and followed the messenger to the command center. The room, once an architectural marvel of flowing crystal and living light, now hummed with emergency generators and makeshift equipment. The elegant control panels were covered with military displays showing the Krell advance. Nari stood at the key center, her normally immaculate robe stained and torn. Around her, a mix of civilians and guards worked frantically at their stations. "The humans claim they're coming," she said without preamble, "but the Krell will breach the inner sanctum before they arrive." Tay studied the tactical display. Red indicators showing Krell forces surrounded the blue dot of the inner city. "How long until our shields fail completely?" The engineer, Jin, looked up from his calculations. "At current rates of bombardment, less than 2 rotations, maybe 18. How as if we're lucky." "And these humans," Tay asked, "how long until they reach us?" "Captain Day estimates their fleet will engage the Krell in orbit within 15 minutes, Nari replied. "But she warns that even if they break through, ground support will take time." A tremendous boom shook the building, sending dust cascading. From the ceiling, alarms blared as another section of the shield grid failed. "Western perimeter breached," shouted the sensor operator. "Krell ground forces entering Sector 7. Tay moved to the tactical display, his mind racing. "Divert power from the northern shield. It's the least populated area now." "But that section protects the medical center," protested Jin. "And if the Krell break through here," Tay pointed to the western approach, "they'll reach the evacuation tunnels. We lose everyone." Jin nodded grimly and rerouted power. On the display, the northern section of the shield faded as the western section brightened slightly. "Commander," called a guard from the door, "we've got wounded coming in from the front." "Lines?" "The Krell, they're using some kind of new weapon. It's burning through our barriers like they're paper." Tay turned to Nari. "Your humans better be everything you promised. We can't hold much longer." "Buy us time," Nari said quietly. "That's all we need." Outside, a new sound joined the chaos, the high-pitched whine of Krell assault carriers moving into position around the inner sanctum. Through the windows, Tay could see their dark shapes hovering over the once beautiful skyline. "All civilians to the central shelters," Tay ordered. "All guards to defensive positions. We hold until reinforcements arrive." As his officers rushed to comply, Tay studied the orbital display. Far above them, the massive Krell fleet maintained its blockade of the planet. But at the edge of the screen, tiny dots appeared, moving with impossible speed toward the heart of the enemy formation. "Humans," he murmured. "I hope you fight as well as you talk." Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. The lights flickered and died, plunging the command center into darkness before emergency systems engaged, casting everything in a dim red glow. "Shield capacity at 30%, Jin announced, his voice steady despite everything. "Structural integrity of the main tower compromised. We should move critical operations to the underground bunker." Tay nodded and began organizing the retreat. As personnel gathered essential equipment, He found himself standing beside Nari at the window, watching Krell's soldiers pour through the gaps in their defenses. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought I'd die fighting. Our people have been peaceful for so long." Nari's eyes reflected the fires below. "Perhaps that was our mistake. The galaxy isn't the place we thought it was." Together they watched as the first wave of Krell troops reached the plaza below the tower. Even if the humans broke through now, Tay realized they might find nothing left to save. The underground bunker shook as another explosion hit somewhere above. Dust filtered down from the ceiling onto the crowded refugees. Children cried while adults tried to comfort them with hollow reassurances. In the command section, sealed off by a hastily erected barrier, Commander Tay studied the failing defenses on a cracked display screen. "Final perimeter breach in sectors 2, 5, and 9, reported Jin, his voice hoarse from the dust and smoke. "Krell heavy units are less than half a kilometer from this position." Ambassador Nari stood beside the communications array, desperately, trying to re-establish contact with the promised human fleet. The equipment sputtered and hissed with static. "Any word from orbit?" Tay asked, not looking up from the tactical display showing the overwhelming Krell forces surrounding them. Nari shook her head. "Nothing since their last transmission. The Krell jammers are too strong." Around them, the remaining Elysian Guard prepared for a final stand. They had never been warriors. Their elegant uniforms had been designed for ceremonies and parades, not battle. Now they checked makeshift weapons with grim determination. "We should evacuate the ambassador through the tunnel network," suggested Minho. "A small team might be able to reach the southern mountains." Tay considered this briefly, then shook his head. "The Krell have deployed ground-penetrating sensors. They'd find you before you made it 5 kilometers. A young guard burst through the door, breathing heavily. "Commander, Krell shock troops have reached the central plaza. They're deploying some kind of drilling machine against the bunker doors." Tay straightened his uniform, a futile gesture of dignity in the face of certain death. "How long?" "Minutes. Maybe less." The lights flickered as something heavy struck the structure above them. A support beam cracked, sending more dust cascading. "Down. Move everyone deeper into the shelter," Tay ordered. "Barricade the inner doors. We'll hold them at the main entrance as long as possible." As the guard rushed to comply, Nari touched Tai's arm. "I'm staying with you." "Ambassador." "No," she said firmly. "I won't hide while others fight." Tay nodded, then distributed the remaining weapons among his officers. They had enough energy cells for perhaps 30 minutes of sustained fire. After that, it would be hand-to-hand against the armored Krell soldiers. The ceiling shook again. Harder this time. A display panel crashed to the floor, shattering. In the distance, they could hear the grinding of the Krell drilling machine working through the bunker's outer defenses. "It was an honor to serve with you all," Tay said quietly to his officers. Then something unexpected happened. The communications, hooray, silent for the past hour, suddenly burst to life with a crackling voice. "Elysium Ground Forces, this is Captain Day of the Earth Defense Fleet. Do you copy?" "I repeat, Elysium Forces, respond." Nari lunged for the console. "This is Ambassador Nari. We hear you." "Ambassador, secure your position. We're engaging the Krell fleet now. Things are about to get very interesting up here." Before anyone could respond, the bunker was rocked by a new type of explosion. Not the steady bombardment they had endured for hours, but something far more powerful. The sound reverberated through the structure, causing everyone to cover their ears. "What was that?" gasped Minho. The sensor operator stared at his readings in disbelief. "Something just hit the Krell command ship in orbit. Energy readings are... I've never seen anything like this." Above ground, those with a view of the sky witnessed something impossible. The perpetual darkness created by the Krell blockade was suddenly broken by blinding flashes of light. The cloud cover parted as massive. Energy discharges tore through the atmosphere. In the upper atmosphere, the impossible was happening. Where the Krell fleet had reigned unchallenged, chaos now erupted. Human warships, sleek angular vessels trailing blue energy, appeared directly within the heart of the Krell formation. Not from the system's edge as expected, but from nowhere, as if the fabric of space itself had torn open. The Krell ships, caught completely by surprise, had no time to reorient their weapons. The first human salvo cut through 3 Krell cruisers before they could raise shields. In the bunker, the communications array now showed visual feed from orbit. The Elysians gathered around in stunned silence, watching as the supposedly primitive humans executed battle maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible for their level of technology. "How are they doing this?" whispered Jin, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. "Their ships are performing micro-jumps between attack runs. That technology shouldn't exist for centuries." On the screen, human vessels vanished and reappeared behind Krell ships, firing precisely at vulnerable points before jumping away from returning fire. The massive Krell dreadnought that had led the invasion was surrounded by smaller human craft that darted around it like insects, too fast to target. "The Krell ground forces are pulling back," shouted the sensor operator. "They're retreating to their landing craft." Tay could hardly believe it. "They're running?" "No," Nari said, understanding dawning on her face. "They're being recalled to defend their fleet." Outside, the grinding of the drill had stopped. The bunker fell eerily quiet as the bombardment ceased. On the tactical display, the red dots representing Krell forces were indeed moving away from the city center, streaming back toward their landing zones. "Ambassador," came Captain Day's voice again, "we've broken their orbital blockade. Prepare to receive ground forces within the hour. Hold on just a little longer." As the transmission ended, the Elysians looked at each other in stunned silence. After days of hopelessness, the impossible had happened. They moved to the few remaining viewports, watching as human ships now filled the sky where Krell vessels had loomed just minutes before. "They came," Nari said softly. "They actually came." The first human dropship landed in what remained of the central plaza, its engines sending swirling clouds of dust and debris across the ruined courtyard. Unlike the bulky Krell vessels, this craft was sleek and compact, designed for speed rather than intimidation. Its doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing dim red interior lighting. Elysian scientist Hana pressed against the broken window of the observation tower, her recording device clutched tightly in her hands. After 3 days hiding in the underground shelters, she had volunteered to return to the surface to document the arrival of their supposed saviors. "Are you getting this?" she whispered into her communicator. In the bunker below, Ambassador Nari and the others watched through Hana's transmitted feed. The first human to emerge wore armor unlike anything the Elysians had seen before. Not the bulky exoskeletons favored by the Krell, but a flexible suit. That seemed to shift colors slightly, adapting to the surroundings. The helmet featured no visible eye slits, just a smooth, reflective surface that scanned the area methodically. More soldiers followed, moving with quick, efficient motions. Unlike the 6-limbed Krell who stomped heavily across the ground, these humans seemed to float, their footsteps nearly silent as they spread out in a defensive formation around their ship. 12 soldiers, Hana noted, just 12 against the remaining Krell forces. The human point team signaled with quick hand gestures, and half the squad moved toward a pile of rubble where Krell soldiers had established a firing position. Instead of charging directly as the Krell would have done, the humans split into smaller teams approaching from multiple angles. "What are they doing?" Commander Tay's voice crackled over Hana's communicator. "The Krell outnumber them at least 5-1 in that sector." Before Hana could respond, one of the humans threw something small and cylindrical toward the Krell position. It bounced once, then exploded in a blinding flash of light and sound. Hana's recording device automatically adjusted for the glare, showing the Krell soldiers flailing in confusion, their compound eyes overwhelmed by the flash. The humans moved in perfect coordination. While the Krell were blinded, 3 soldiers darted forward, firing weapons that made almost no sound. Their movements reminded Hana of the ancient Elysian dances, fluid, precise, each motion flowing into the next without hesitation. "They're not just fighting," she whispered. "They're communicating with each other somehow." Indeed, the humans needed no verbal commands. They operated like parts of a single organism, covering each other's movements, anticipating threats before they materialized. Within moments, the Krell position fell silent. More dropships appeared overhead, descending toward different parts of the city. From each one, small teams of humans deployed with the same efficient precision. "Hana," came Ambassador Nari's voice. "The human commander wants to make contact with us. Can you reach the plaza safely? Hannah surveyed the rubble-strewn path. I think so. The Krell seemed to be pulling back toward their landing zone. She made her way cautiously down the crumbling stairwell of the observation tower. Outside, the air smelled of burning metal and strange chemicals, the aftermath of the orbit battle. As she approached the plaza, she noticed something odd about how the human soldiers moved. Unlike the rigid formations of the Krell, they constantly adjusted their positions, using every piece of cover available, never standing still for more. After a few seconds, a human soldier spotted her and raised a hand, not pointing a weapon but signaling her to wait. The soldier touched the side of their helmet, clearly communicating with someone. Moments later, a figure emerged from the dropship. This human wore lighter armor than the others, with insignia that must denote rank. The helmet retracted, folding seamlessly into the collar of the suit, revealing the face of a woman with short dark hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. "You must be the Elysian contact," she said, her voice carrying easily across the plaza. "I'm Captain Day of the Earth Expeditionary Force." As Hannah approached, she noticed more details about the human soldiers. Their weapons weren't the crude projectile launchers she had expected from a primitive species, but sophisticated energy rifles with modular attachments. Their armor up close contained intricate circuitry that pulsed with faint blue light. "How is this possible?" Hannah asked, scientific curiosity overriding protocol. "The Council classified your species as pre-interstellar. Your technology shouldn't be this advanced for at least 2 centuries. Captain Day smiled slightly. "The Council doesn't know humans very well. We tend to develop fastest when people tell us something's impossible." A series of explosions echoed from the city's edge where another human team was engaging a Krell heavy weapons platform. Instead of matching the Krell's firepower, the humans used speed and misdirection, appearing briefly to draw fire, then vanishing behind cover before striking from unexpected angles. "Your tactics," Hannah said, gesturing toward the battle. "The Krell fight like machines following predetermined patterns. But your soldiers, we adapt," said Day simply. "That's what humans do best." She touched her communicator. "Now, I understand you have civilians sheltered underground. Let's get them secured before the Krell regroup." As the captain issued orders to her team, Hannah watched a nearby squad of human soldiers dismantle a damaged Krell walker. Unlike the Elysian engineers who would have studied it cautiously, the humans were fearlessly taking it apart, already figuring out how to use its weapons against its creators. In that moment, Hannah understood why the Galactic Council had feared humanity's potential. It wasn't just their technology that made them dangerous. It was their innate ability to turn any situation to their advantage, to learn and improvise in ways the older, more structured species of the galaxy had forgotten. She activated her communicator. "Ambassador Nari, you were right about the humans. They're not just warriors, they're problem solvers, and I think the Krell have no idea what they're dealing with." Captain June wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the tactical display inside the mobile command center. The holographic map showed the current positions of all forces across Elysium's capital city, blue markers for human Elysian teams, red for the retreating Krell. For the first time since the invasion began, there were more blue markers than red. "They're falling back to Sector 7, June explained to the mixed group of human officers and Elysian volunteers gathered around the display. The Krell never expected to lose air superiority. Their entire battle doctrine depends on orbital support. Commander Tay stood opposite him, his tall Elysian frame making him tower over the human captain. 3 days ago, Tay had been preparing for death. Now he was planning counterattacks. "Their remaining ground forces are still substantial," Tay noted, pointing to a cluster of red markers. "At least 2,000 combat units with heavy armor support." June nodded. "True, but they're bunching up. That's their weakness. Krell tactics rely on overwhelming force applied directly. When that fails, they default to defensive clusters." He zoomed in on the map. "They're waiting for new orders from their central command." An Elysian volunteer named Seok raised his hand hesitantly. Until 4 days ago, he had been a municipal gardener. Now he wore pieces of salvaged Krell armor over his civilian clothes. "Why don't they adapt? They must see their strategy isn't working." "That's not how Krell think," answered Hannah, who had joined the tactical team as a scientific advisor. "Their society is completely hierarchical. Lower ranks aren't permitted to make strategic decisions. Only their commanders can change battle plans," June smiled, "and their commanders are currently dealing with our fleet in orbit." He tapped the display, highlighting several key positions. "This gives us our window we need to strike before they reorganize." Outside the command center, human dropships continued to bring in supplies and reinforcements. Unlike the initial Special Forces teams that had secured the landing zones, these were regular infantry, but even they moved with a precision that impressed the watching Elysians. June outlined his plan. 6 mixed teams would target Krell communication nodes. Without orders from above, the ground forces would be trapped in their defensive formations. Meanwhile, a larger force led by June himself would create a diversion, drawing Krell attention away from the smaller strike teams. "We need Elysian volunteers for each team," June explained. "You know the city layout and can help us navigate through the rubble." Tay had expected reluctance. His people were scientists and artists, not soldiers. Instead, hands rose immediately across the room. The Elysians who had cowered in bunkers days before now stepped forward eagerly. Something had changed in them. They had seen the humans fight and learned that resistance was possible. "I'll go with Captain June," announced Tay, adjusting the human-designed combat vest that had replaced his ceremonial uniform. "My place is on the front line with our allies." As the teams prepared, June pulled aside one of his sergeants, a stocky woman who had been retrofitting Elysian energy tools into makeshift weapons for the volunteers. "How are they doing?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the Elysians checking their equipment. "Better than expected," she replied. "They're quick learners, not natural fighters, but they're smart and they follow instructions well. And they're motivated. It's their home we're fighting for." An hour later, June led his force through the ruins of what had once been an elegant residential district. Beside him, Tay moved with newfound confidence, his natural grace now channeled into combat awareness. Behind them came 20 humans and 15 Elysians, advancing in the leapfrog pattern June had taught them, half providing cover while the others moved forward. The Krell had established a defensive perimeter around a fallen water tower, their heavy weapons covering all obvious approaches. In the past, they would have simply blasted their way through such a position, suffering heavy casualties but overwhelming the enemy through sheer numbers. June had something different in mind. "Watch and learn," he told Tay as they crouched behind a collapsed wall. "Humans don't fight fair, we fight to win." Instead of attacking the fortified position, June sent teams to hit and run at different points along the perimeter. The Krell responded predictably, shifting forces to repel each attack. But these weren't real assaults, just diversions. Meanwhile, 4 humans with special equipment had circled behind the Krell position, using the city's damaged sewer system. They planted sonic disruptors, devices specifically calibrated to affect the Krell's sensory organs, at key points around the enemy fortification. When all teams were clear, June activated the disruptors. The effect was immediate. Krell soldiers emerged from cover, their 6 limbs flailing as the sound, inaudible to humans and Elysians, overwhelmed their sensory systems. What had been an impenetrable position collapsed into chaos. "Now!" June ordered, and his combined force swept forward, neutralizing the disoriented Krell with minimal casualties. As they secured the position, reports came in from the other teams. All 6 communication nodes had been captured or destroyed. Across the city, Krell forces were now effectively blind, cut off from their command structure. Tay looked at June with newfound respect. "The Council was wrong about your species," he said. "They thought your warlike history made you dangerous and unpredictable. They didn't understand that it also made you the perfect allies in a fight like this." June checked his tactical display, which showed blue markers steadily replacing red across the city map. "The tide's turning," he said simply. "For the first time since this began, we have the initiative." Around them, humans and Elysians worked together to secure their position, already preparing for the next push. Where days before there had been only despair and resignation, Now there was purpose and, most importantly, hope. The Elysian High Council chamber had been converted into a war room, its elegant crystal walls now lined with tactical displays and communication equipment. Ambassador Nari sat at the head of the long table, flanked by Commander Tay and the Elysian civilian leadership. Across from them sat Captain Day and Captain June, representing the human forces that had turned the tide of battle. The Krell flagship has retreated beyond the system's edge, reported Captain Day, manipulating the holographic display to show the current positions of the remaining enemy forces. Their ground troops are surrendering in sectors 3 through 7. We estimate complete pacification within 12 hours. The Elysians exchanged looks of wonder. Just 3 days ago, their civilization had been facing extinction. Now they were discussing victory terms. What I don't understand, said Jin, who had been appointed as science liaison, is how you achieved this level of technological advancement. When your delegation visited 3 cycles ago, you arrived in a ship that could barely achieve interplanetary travel. Now you have vessels that can outmaneuver Krell battlecruisers. Captain Day glanced at Captain June, who nodded slightly. Dai turned back to the assembled Elysians. What I'm about to tell you is known to very few species in the galaxy, she said. The Council certainly doesn't know, and we'd prefer to keep it that way for now. The holographic display shifted, showing the human solar system. The image zoomed in on a small object orbiting beyond the planet Neptune, an asteroid barely 20 kilometers across. 7 Earth years ago, our deep space probe detected unusual energy readings from this object, Day explained. When we sent a mission to investigate, we discovered it wasn't a natural formation at all. The display showed the asteroid opening like a flower, revealing a structure within. It was a vault, continued Day, built by a species that called themselves the Architects. According to the records we found inside, they were the first spacefaring civilization in our galaxy, emerging nearly 1 million years ago. Hannah leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. What happened to them? They evolved beyond physical form, June said. At least that's what the records suggest. Before they departed our plane of existence, they left these vaults throughout the galaxy. Time capsules containing their knowledge and technology, meant to be discovered when younger species were ready. The display shifted again, showing humans in spacesuits carefully removing objects from the vault, strange devices that seemed to bend light around them. The Council has always classified species based on their observed technological level, Day explained. When your delegation visited Earth, we were already studying the Architect technology. We knew what the Council would do if they discovered what we had found. They would have quarantined your system, Nari realized, placed monitors to ensure you didn't develop too quickly. Exactly. So we showed them what they expected to see. Young species still finding its way to the stars. Day smiled slightly. Meanwhile, our best scientists worked to understand the Architect technologies. Jin shook his head in amazement. But surely you couldn't have mastered such advanced technology in just a few years. We didn't try to understand everything, June explained. We focused on specific applications, faster than light travel, energy weapons, defensive systems, and we didn't rush to build a fleet immediately. You studied, you prepared, said Tay, beginning to understand. You waited for the right moment. Humans are cautious when it comes to new technology, Day nodded. Our history has taught us that rushing into weapons development usually ends badly, so we took our time, built prototypes, tested extensively. Then we detected Krell ships on our long-range sensors, continued June. We monitored their attacks on the outer colonies of several species. When we realized they were heading toward Elysium, we accelerated our production timeline. The display showed human shipyards, hidden within hollowed-out asteroids, constructing the vessels that had saved Elysium. But why help us? Asked an Elysian counselor. You could have remained hidden, developed your technology in secret. Dai and June exchanged glances again. June spoke first. The Architect records mentioned something called the cycle. Apparently, every few thousand years, a species becomes aggressive, expands rapidly, and attempts to dominate the galaxy. The Krell are just the latest in this pattern. The Architects believed that breaking this cycle required cooperation between different species, added Day. Each civilization brings unique perspectives and strengths. The Elysians excel at biological sciences and sustainable development. Humans have a talent for adaptation and warfare. Together we're stronger than either would be alone. Nari considered this. So you didn't just come to save us. You came seeking allies. We came because it was the right thing to do, June said simply. But yes, we hope this marks the beginning of a partnership. There were other vaults mentioned in the architect records, some containing technologies even they considered dangerous. If the Krell find one of those, the implication hung in the air. The Elysians looked at each other, centuries of peaceful isolation now giving way to a broader galactic perspective. So what happens now? Asked Commander Tay. Captain Day stood, looking at each Elysian in turn. Now we rebuild your world. We share technologies carefully and responsibly, and together we prepare for what's coming next. Because the Krell might be retreating today, but this war is just beginning. Outside the council chamber, through the tall crystal windows, the skies above Elysium's capital had cleared of smoke for the first time in days. Human ships patrolled alongside the few remaining Elysian defense platforms, symbols of a new alliance, born from the ashes of near extinction. The alert sirens wailed across Elysium as orbital sensors detected multiple hyperspace ruptures at the system's edge. On the main view screen in the Joint Command Center, dozens of red indicators appeared, representing the largest Krell battle group seen since the invasion began. Reinforcements, said Captain Day grimly. And look at that flagship, the central Krell vessel dwarfed all others, a massive construct of dark metal and weapon emplacements that stretched nearly 3 kilometers from end to end. Its hull bore distinctive markings that the tactical computer immediately identified. The inevitable Dominion, read Captain June from the display. Flagship of Supreme Commander Vax, the Krell are sending their best. Ambassador Nari studied the approaching fleet with newfound calm. Where once such a sight would have meant certain doom, now she felt a curious confidence. Perhaps it was the steady presence of the human officers around her, or perhaps something deeper had changed within the Elysian people themselves. How long until they reach weapons range? Asked Commander Tay, adjusting the new combat uniform the humans had provided. Gone was the ceremonial dress of peacetime. He now wore the pragmatic gear of a soldier. 4 hours, replied Captain Day, just enough time to implement the final phase of our defense. The plan they had developed over the past days was audacious, combining human military strategy with Elysian biological expertise. While the humans had been helping restore the planet's defenses, Elysian scientists had been working around the clock in their remaining laboratories. Hana led the team briefing, her slender fingers manipulating the holographic display with practiced ease. We've analyzed the biological samples collected from Krell prisoners. Their nervous systems are vulnerable to specific bioelectric frequencies. She displayed a molecular structure that rotated slowly above the table. This compound, when aerosolized, will amplify that vulnerability tenfold. Sounds like a nerve agent, noted one of the human officers with concern. Similar in concept, Hana acknowledged, but precisely targeted to Krell biology. It won't harm humans, Elysians, or any other species. The effect is also temporary, paralysis lasting approximately 1 hour with no permanent damage. Captain June nodded appreciatively. Non-lethal, but effective. This could change the entire dynamic of the ground battle. The plan took shape. Human ships would engage the Krell fleet in orbit, focusing on containment rather than destruction. Meanwhile, dropships would deploy the Elysian compound directly into Krell ground formations. With the enemy forces temporarily immobilized, combined human Elysian teams would move in to secure their weapons and communication equipment. As the command staff finalized details, Captain Day pulled Captain June aside. The Supreme Commander's presence changes things, she said quietly. This isn't just about Elysium anymore. The Krell rarely commit high command to battlefield operations. June understood immediately. They're worried. Word of their defeats must have spread. Exactly. Vax can't afford to lose here. It would undermine Krell authority throughout the sector. Day hesitated. We may need to use the architect weapons. The weapons in question had been held in reserve, partly because the humans were still learning their capabilities, and partly from ethical concerns. Unlike conventional armaments, the architect technology didn't just destroy targets, it temporarily phased them into another dimensional state. The effect was devastatingly efficient, but raised troubling questions about the fate of those affected. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," June said. 3 hours later, the human fleet moved into position. Unlike their previous engagement, where surprise had been their advantage, now they arranged themselves in plain sight, a clear challenge to the approaching Krell armada. Smaller craft darted between the larger vessels, their movements precise and coordinated. On the inevitable Dominion, Supreme Commander Vax received the tactical assessment with cold fury. The six-limbed Krell officer towered over his subordinates, his exoskeleton armor hissing as he moved. "These humans defend the Elysians as if this were their own world," he noted, studying the enemy formation. "Their interference is unprecedented. Our intelligence indicated the humans were pre-interstellar," offered his second-in-command tentatively. "These vessels employ technologies beyond their development timeline." "Clearly, our intelligence was flawed," Vax said coldly. "No matter, they are still outnumbered 3-1. Prepare all ships for attack pattern dominance. We will make an example of both species." The Krell fleet accelerated, weapon systems powering up as they approached Elysium's orbit. On the planet below, civilians watched the skies with a mixture of fear and hope. When the battle began, it defied all conventional tactics. The human ships, instead of maintaining formation, scattered in seemingly random patterns. The Krell, attempting to track multiple targets simultaneously, found their targeting systems overwhelmed. "They're using micro-jump technology," exclaimed a Krell tactical officer. "Impossible." Human vessels would appear briefly, fire precision strikes at Krell shield generators and weapons arrays, then vanish before countermeasures could lock on. It wasn't just superior technology, it was a fundamental difference in approach. Where Krell doctrine emphasized overwhelming force, humans prioritized mobility and unpredictability. On the planet's surface, dropships deployed the Elysian compound directly above Krell ground formations. Within minutes, thousands of Krell soldiers froze in place, their nervous systems temporarily shut down. Combined human Elysian teams moved in, securing positions that would have cost countless lives to take by force. Supreme Commander Vax watched, his carefully planned assault disintegrate into chaos. His flagship remained untouched, protected by layers of shields, but smaller vessels were being disabled one by one. "Enough of this," he growled. "Target the Elysian capital, full planetary bombardment." Even his officers seemed shocked. "Commander, there are still our own troops on the surface. They are already lost," Vax said dismissively. "We will sterilize this planet and deal with the humans afterward." As the massive weapon arrays of the inevitable Dominion aligned toward Elysium, Captain Day made her decision. "Deploy architect weapons," she ordered. "Target the flagship only." From the human command vessel, a single projectile launched, small, unremarkable, trailing a faint blue light. The Krell point defenses didn't even register it as a threat. It passed through their shields as if they didn't exist, and attached itself to the flagship's hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a sphere of distortion expanded from the point of impact. It wasn't an explosion in any conventional sense, more like reality itself folding inward. The massive Krell flagship seemed to compress, its structure, bending impossibly before vanishing entirely from normal space. Supreme Commander Vax and his flagship, pride of the Krell Dominion, were simply gone. The effect on the remaining Krell forces was immediate. Without their command structure, the rigid hierarchy collapsed into disarray. Some ships continued fighting, some attempted to retreat. Others simply powered down their weapons and held position. On the surface of Elysium, humans and Elysians watched the skies together as the battle concluded. The definitive moment in their shared history wasn't marked by destruction, but by a strange absence. The space where tyranny had stood moments before, now empty and full of possibility. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations filled the tiered seating, their murmured conversations creating a constant background hum. At the center of the chamber stood a circular platform, where delegates could address the assembly. For the first time in council history, humans and Elysians stood together on that platform. Ambassador Nari, her formal robes restored to their former elegance, represented her people with quiet dignity. Beside her stood Captain June, now serving as Earth's first official ambassador to the galactic community. The council elder, a Wuzan whose crystalline body reflected the chamber's light in constantly shifting patterns, spoke first. For 12,000 cycles, this council has maintained galactic stability through careful regulation of technological development and interspecies contact. The elder's voice resonated through the chamber. The recent events at Elysium Prime represent an unprecedented disruption to that order. Captain June remained calm under the implicit criticism. During the 3 weeks since the Battle of Elysium, human diplomats had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment. They understood that saving one world had altered the course of galactic politics forever. The humans violated our most fundamental directives, continued the elder. They concealed their true technological capabilities. They intervened militarily in a conflict outside their assigned sector. They deployed weapons of unknown origin and effect. A ripple of agreement passed through the assembly. Many species viewed humanity's sudden emergence with suspicion or outright fear. And yet, the elder's tone shifted slightly, they also prevented the extinction of the Elysian people. They halted the Krell expansion that threatened multiple peaceful worlds. These actions cannot be dismissed. Ambassador Nari stepped forward. Honored Council, for centuries my people trusted in the protection this body promised. When the Krell came, we sent distress signals to every council world. None responded. Her voice carried no bitterness, only a statement of fact. Only the humans, a species you deemed unworthy of full membership, answered our call. The chamber fell silent. Many representatives shifted uncomfortably, aware their governments had ignored Elysian pleas for help, calculating that one small civilization was an acceptable loss if it meant avoiding conflict with the Krell. Captain June spoke. Next. Humanity does not seek to disrupt the galactic order. We respect the wisdom and experience represented in this council. He paused, letting his next words carry appropriate weight. But we cannot and will not stand by while peaceful civilizations face extinction, not when we have the means to help. A delegate from the technologically advanced Mithran Concordat arose. These humans speak of helping, yet they possess weapons that removed an entire Krell flagship from existence. How do we know they won't use such power against Council worlds next? Captain June met the challenge directly. The architect technology we deployed was a last resort against an enemy preparing to destroy an entire planet. We have established strict protocols governing its use. He scanned the assembly. We are prepared to share these protocols with the Council and accept reasonable oversight. This offer sent fresh murmurs through the chamber. The humans were offering transparency that few expected. After hours of debate, the Council reached its decision. Humanity would be granted full membership status, an unprecedented acceleration of the normal process. In return, Earth would lead a new defensive alliance, providing protection to smaller civilizations vulnerable to aggression. The humans would share certain technologies, but under careful regulation. Most significantly, the Council acknowledged a fundamental failing in its previous approach. Neutrality in the face of extinction was no longer acceptable. 1 month later, on the highest balcony of Elysium's newly rebuilt central tower, Commander Tay and Captain June watched the sunset paint the reconstructed city in gold. Human and Elysian crews worked side by side throughout the capital, their distinct technologies blending to create something entirely new. My great-grandparents told stories about the ancient city, said Tay, gesturing to where crystal spires once again reached skyward. I never thought I'd see anything like it in my lifetime. Especially not after the invasion. Captain June nodded, leaning against the railing. Your people rebuild with remarkable speed. Our engineers are still trying to understand how your living architecture works. And our scientists are still marveling at your adaptive materials. Tay smiled. It seems we have much to teach each other. Below them, a mixed group of Elysian and human children played in a newly restored garden. The human children, part of families who had volunteered for the reconstruction effort, were learning the traditional Elysian game of light patterns while teaching their new friends the human game of soccer. The council representatives leave. Tomorrow, Tay noted. Do you think they're satisfied with what they've seen? Some are. Others remain suspicious. June shrugged slightly. Change never comes easily, especially to institutions that have remained static for thousands of years. In orbit above them, the first ships of the new defensive alliance patrolled, a mix of human vessels and contributions from other species who had quickly recognized the shifting balance of power. The Krell had withdrawn to their core systems, their expansion halted not just by military defeat, but by the unexpected unity forming against them. We've received word from 3 other worlds under Krell pressure, June said. They're requesting similar protection agreements. Earth's shipyards are working at full capacity to meet the demand. And the Architect Vault, Tay asked. Have your people found others? 2 so far. We're proceeding carefully just as we did with the first. June's expression grew thoughtful. The architects left more than technology. They left warnings about cycles of aggression and conquest, patterns that repeat throughout galactic history. They believed diverse species working together was the only way to break those cycles. As darkness fell, lights activated throughout the city. Not the harsh illumination of military necessity, but the soft living glow that had always defined Elysian aesthetics. In that gentle light, the scars of war seemed less prominent, the promise of renewal more certain. 3 cycles. When your delegation first visited our world, did you imagine we would end up here? Tay asked. Captain June laughed softly. Honestly, no. We were just excited to meet another intelligent species. He looked out over the city. But that's humanity for you. We're constantly surprising ourselves with what we can accomplish, especially when someone tells us something is impossible. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, human and Elysian ships moved in coordinated patterns above the planet, not in military formation, but in a ceremonial dance celebrating their new alliance. The light from their engines traced patterns visible from the surface, symbols of protection and partnership that could be seen by every citizen. On worlds across the galaxy, news of the Elysium Alliance spread, carrying with it a message that would reshape civilization. Compassion without strength may falter, but strength without compassion brings only destruction. It was in the balance between these qualities that a new galactic order would emerge, one where the unique gifts of each species contributed to the security and prosperity of all. And at the center of this transformation stood humanity, no longer hidden or restrained but fully engaged with their place in the cosmos, ready to defend those in need with the same ferocity they had shown at Elysium Prime, when all hope seemed lost and everything changed.